Is Joshua Rogers from SOAS, who will speak about the making of a weak state, the war in Yemen 1962 to 1970.
Thanks. So in my paper I want to approach the civil war in Yemen from 62 to 70 from the perspective of state formation. And as the title suggests, I think that the war had a really significant impact on who ruled Yemen and particularly on how it was ruled for the next decades. I realized that sort of this shorthand I've used, labeling this outcome a weak state, is potentially a bit misleading. And really what I'm interested in is the impact producing and reacting to armed violence had on the distribution of power and on sort of formal institutions in Yemen, rather than on labeling the result. To engage in this exploration, I want to approach the state through the prism of state formation, so exploring the often contradictory processes by which types of centralized political order came into being during this time in Yemen. Helpfully, there's been a marked convergence in work in political economy and parts of sociology interested in long-term trajectories of the sort. I'm particularly thinking of the work of Charles Tilly here, towards providing an analytical vocabulary to do that. And I think what's useful to take away are 4 points that these literatures have in common, which is an interest in historical processes that shape state formation, rather than kind of coming up with lists of state functions or abstracting in that way. It's interested in political settlements, so how specific groups and powerful social actors use the coercive capabilities of the state for the benefit. It views institutions as a product of significant and ongoing conflict, and it recognizes the importance of violence in those conflicts and in producing and in reproducing the state. So broadly, I assume there's kind of different levels of knowledge about the civil war in Yemen during this time, so I'll make a very, very quick summary. It was launched by a military coup in 1962 against, shortly after Imam Ahmed, the king in Yemen, died and had passed on the eminence to his son, who managed to flee Sana'a during the coup and succeeded in rallying support of several of Yemen's most important tribes, and also succeeded in gaining support from Saudi Arabia, which provided a lot of funding to what became known as the royalist war effort. Nasser's Egypt, on the other hand, backed the coup, probably was involved in its planning, and really poured significant military and financial resources into Yemen during this time, including up to 60,000 troops and thousands of advisors and teachers and experts and so on. And indeed, every Yemeni ministry during this time would have an Egyptian advisor who, depending on the exact constellation of forces, more or less called the shots. And finally, after 1967, Egypt withdrew after the defeat in the 67 war pretty quickly from Yemen, which clearly changed the dynamics and launched a much more, if you will, intimate cycle of Yemeni on Yemeni violence that continued for another few years. So up until now, a lot of the writing on the Civil War has been, there's a sort of an initial slew of writing right around when the war happened, and that of course tended to be quite journalistic. And since then there really has been pretty limited interest in the war in Yemen. A lot of writing is focused on the interest of the great powers or the regional actors in Yemen, but really not that much on Yemen itself. And also the historiography on Yemen, the Civil War receives relatively short shrift, and where it is really explored in more depth, it tends to be treated as a traumatic caesura during which things were frozen and nothing much happened, which seems to me to be a misreading of this period, but a misreading that it shares with a lot of the more broad kind of peace and conflict literature, which tends to posit a similar sort of tendency. So what do I want to talk about? What do I think happened during the conflict? I just picked out 3 sort of broad trends I want to explore a little bit. And broadly, these are that the war really reinforced the political influence of tribes within Yemen, that it was absolutely key to generating a powerful officer caste that ended up dominating Yemeni politics for the next decades. And at the very least, it provided a catalyst for reorientating what kind of the formal institutions of the Yemeni state were about, what they did, from primarily being about taxation to really being about allocating resources that accrue to the center in a sort of patronage system. So during the war, pressures to mobilize tribal support and fighters transformed the role of the tribes within the Yemeni political settlement. It increased the power of the tribes a great deal, reversing decades of centralization under the Imamate, while simultaneously empowering tribal leaders vis-a-vis kind of the ordinary tribesmen, so centralized power within the tribes because it was concentrating patronage and financial resources in their hands. Underwriting this dynamic was a kind of bidding war between the royalists and republicans, or more accurately, between their external patrons, between Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Both sides had significant interest in buying support and loyalty, and spend significant sums on trying to do so. And you have very recurrent patterns of tribes switching sides repeatedly over the course of the war. And in fact, reading some of the reporting on the war at the time, it seems like there are kind of these big battles surging back and forth, but really what's happening is groups are switching sides, as opposed to much happening on the ground, as it were. After the Egyptians retreated, the Republican government picked up the tab, and these payments also continued after the end of the Civil War. So that, in the words of Paul Trash, who's an anthropologist working on North Yemen, the tide of money and guns that flowed to the north during the Civil War never receded. The most successful tribal leaders were able to significantly expand their influence and become government insiders, which really would have been unthinkable under the Imamate, and held governorships in ministerial positions. And at a more local level, it's really instructive to look at anthropological studies of the 1970s, which was a growth industry, if you will, in Yemen immediately after the war, because of the role that they ascribed to tribal leaders in local governance, which seems to be significantly at odds with what the situation was like before the Civil War. The other major beneficiary of the Civil War was Yemen's budding military elite. Under the Imamate, the standing army had been relatively small and had limited training, and officers' political influence was highly circumscribed. With the onset of the war, not least because of the role of officers in the coup, spending on the military increased significantly, and for the years that information is available on the expenditure of the government in Yemen, easily half of the government funds going directly to the military during this time. By the end of the war, the regular military had more than doubled in size. The officer corps came to play a greatly increased role in public administration. Governorships, particularly in Lower Yemen, which is less tribal, went to former officers, and serving officers who were present in each governorate, and played a very important role as going to be the head of security in each governorate. And of course, with control over local administration came a lot of opportunities for enrichment and involvement in smuggling or taxation and so on, that led to significant financial gain for individual officers as well. Now, it would be misleading to cast the officer corps as sort of this monolithic whole, and for the most part, those officers who came to dominate layers of public administration during this time were from minor tribes around Sana'a, and they were able to use the fact that their identity as tribesmen and links that they might have had to build alliances outside of the officer corps against their political rivals inside of it. But unlike tribal leaders, they drew their power and influence from their position in the former military, and often weren't kind of from the big families that might aspire to becoming the head of the tribe, but were instead kind of ordinary tribesmen. In addition to these shifts in the political settlement, the war drove institutional innovations amounting really to a redeployment of the Yemeni state from extraction, from local taxation, to accessing aid and international support and distributing that domestically. The war was marked by a very significant increase in the size of the formal organizations of the state. The number of government employees increased about sevenfold over the course of the war, and doubled like almost immediately within a couple of months of the revolution, as it was portrayed as. But this growth was really quite selective and uneven, and the Republican state was a state that didn't tax, and taxation was notoriously high, and the Yemen was a really big reason for which the Republic was able to tap into popular discontent. And taxes paid under the Republic throughout the whole period of its existence during the Civil War were only a fraction of that collected by the Yemen. Foreign aid and loans instead came to make up the bulk of its budget, and provided much easier revenues. So that the generation of government income really became about tapping into this external funding. There's some quite instructive documents that I found where the government is laying out plans for the coming years, a sort of vision, and really it's like a shopping list of aid projects and sort of what who could be asked for what sort of support, as opposed to any kind of more comprehensive planning or thinking about the requirements of human development. So these aid and loans allowed the government to very rapidly increase outlays. Capital expenditure by the state increased rapidly, as did the number and salaries of government employees. And parts of this investment push were really linked to the war effort, so there were building of access roads, building of ports and airports and so forth. But significant investment also went into schools and various sort of classical development work, which was partially about the self-image as modernizing, but also it was a very powerful way for the state to gain in substance as a vehicle for allocation and generate vested interests in preservation. So, in conclusion, I want to just sum up. I think that considered from the perspective of state formation, the Civil War becomes or emerges as an episode that really set the parameters for the Yemeni state in quite decisive ways. Pressures to mobilize soldiers and tribal fighters, generate consent under conditions of significant conflict, and seize new opportunities for generating funds, underwrote tribal influence, military dominance, and the development of an administration that was structured around generating and distributing international rents. And in very broad terms, I think that's a description of the Yemeni state that students of contemporary Yemen would find very recognizable. I'm going to leave it at that. I have some ideas about what the Yemen sort of looked at as a case study might mean for peace and conflict literature, that people are interested in those ideas, and I'm happy to talk about that.
you very much.